I would do some research among employees and find out, what is frustrating them. I'd ask a simple question about what part of your job do you hate the most? What is the question that you hate the most that a customer asks you? Or what is the complaint you hate the most? And then ask them, how would you fix that?
Welcome to Leadership, the podcast where leadership meets real-world insights. In each episode, you can eavesdrop on exclusive conversations with top thought leaders, best-selling authors, and experts in leadership, communication, relationships, culture, and everything else that shapes your effectiveness in the workplace and in your personal life. Leadership is here for you. Now, here's our host, himself a seasoned coach and best-selling author, Dr. Roger Dean Duncan.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Let's begin with this quote. People are born ignorant, not stupid. They are made stupid by education. Now, that may sound like a line from a comedian, but it's actually from Bertrand Russell, the British philosopher, historian, essayist, social critic, and Nobel laureate. Not exactly known for comedy. Deliberately or not, Russell provided a fair description of what often occurs in organizational cultures. Rules masquerade as reason. Sketchy thinking becomes strategy. Harebrained ideas become products destined for the discount warehouse. Unchallenged nonsense evolves into the status quo. People go along to get along. Such unproductive environments are rarely the work of a single person. This kind of imprudence is nearly always a group activity, a collusion of silent partners. The result is what our guest John Brandt calls Nincompoopery. Yes, Nincompoopery. It's a made-up word, but of course all words are made up. And this one aptly describes behaviors that can frustrate managers, demoralize employees, run customers to the competition, and, constipate and compromise the operations of any government agency. John Brandt offers some excellent antidotes in his best-selling book, Nincompoopery, Why Your Customers Hate You and How to Fix It. John is an experienced executive, entrepreneur, journalist, and researcher. He's founder of the MPI Group, a global management research firm, and is former editor-in-chief and publisher of both Chief Executive and IndustryWeek. John, welcome to Leadership.
Roger, I couldn't be happier to be here. So thanks for inviting me.
Happy to have you. Now, you say that individual nincompoops are not the big problem. It's the nincompoopery. That is the meta-foolishness of the organizations and systems in which people are forced to work. Give us a couple of high-profile examples of nincompoopery in the workplace.
I can give you high-profile examples. I can give you stuff that happens to us every day. I mean, you go to the coffee shop and you get asked what you want. You tell them, and then you get down there and nobody can remember what you have. And you assume, a lot of people, you just say, well, there's some new, why did they hire this nincompoop who can't remember? Except you're not even thinking about the fact that maybe they've not got a system set up where they should be tracking it from one place to the next, or et cetera, et cetera. So we get mad at the nincompoop instead of the nincompoopery. You take your car in to get fixed and you go, it's there, you're inconvenienced for a day or two, you come back and something's not fixed. And you're like, oh my gosh, who would hire such a mechanic that would forget to fix this? And yet maybe it's just something as simple as they don't have a good process set up in that shop, et cetera, for, using something as simple as a checklist. Did you do all these steps before you, and et cetera, or check your work, et cetera. These things happen every day and we tend to get irritated about it. What almost always, though, it's not a nincompoop there. I know very few people in my life that I've ever met, if I've met any, who get up in the morning and say, I would really like to screw up today. Today is the day where I'm going to make so many mistakes that I'm going to set a personal record on idiocy for myself. I don't know anybody like that. Nobody wakes up saying, I want to be a screw up today. Everybody wakes up at least with some hope that they're going to get through the day, be safe, they're going to do some good work, they're going to help people. So why doesn't that happen? Well, most of the time it doesn't happen because we as managers, we as leaders don't set things up in a way to allow people to succeed. We, in fact, many times inadvertently, because we're not trying to screw up either, but we got a misprioritization of something, we will set up a process where these people have no choice but to be seen as nincompoops, because we have not given them the tools, the system, the training to let them do that. My whole thing with this book, this whole concept is let's have a little fun with it, but also let's put the onus on where it should be. The onus for making this work is us as leaders, as us as managers, to say, okay, we've got this wonderful team here. If you had a baseball team and you had somebody who was a really good first baseman, you wouldn't make him the pitcher. If you had you would figure out, how do we do this in a way that takes everybody's talents and organizes them to do what we're trying to do.
Right. Well, what do you see as the early warning signs? What do you see as some of the trends that make it challenging for leaders to avoid nincompoopry?
I think there are a number of things you can look at. There's some stuff. If you're seeing you've got a business and you're not making money, that's a pretty good, or you're struggling all the time. It could be just a bad business, or it could be you're not set up the right way. I think some of the other signs, though, are when you're taking a look at if you're measuring customer frustration, and you can measure that with do an official survey or et cetera. You can just see, are people getting annoyed here? Are we having lots of complaints? And if you're having that, don't blame the people who are being complained to or about. Say, okay, what is the root cause here? How do we look at that? I think there are some other things. We look at so many firms. We've studied, I think for this book, we have at this point, it was like 50,000 firms. I can't even tell you how many firms at this point we've studied. But one of the things you see over and over at firms that are struggling with this and that have these types of problems is a lack of training. When we've done studies in industry after industry, and over again, we find that if you want to be world-class in performance, you need to be training 40 hours per employee per year, all the time. And the interesting thing is that when we ask how much people spend on training, in general, it's always the same percentage. It's just the ones who are training more are getting more out of it going forward. So level of training. And we've looked at firms in the past where, my gosh, we looked at firms where they were training 200 hours, 400 hours per, not lots of them, but some. And you think at that point, is anybody actually working? Except these firms outperform every year. The other thing that we see over and over again, I will get asked, you guys do all this research, what are the two or three things we should do if we wanted to improve or avoid nincompoopry? Number one is how many hours of training per employee. The second thing is, what percentage of your workforce is empowered to make decisions? And there is not a model, except in organizations that deploy force, whether it's an army, a police force, et cetera. There is not a model in a developed economy that works that doesn't put decision-making close to the front line and close to the customer. What you see with these command and control hierarchies that you still see at lots of companies there, it just kills innovation. It kills motivation. Who wants to go somewhere and be told all day what to do? You're back in kindergarten, or your mom's like, go take out the garbage. Nobody wants that. Everybody wants to have some sort of intrinsic idea that they are making a difference. So I guess those are the things that I look for, and you almost always find those.
Well, then let's drill down a little bit. What sort of audit can be done to identify and begin to eradicate organizational nincompoopry?
I think the first thing to do is I would do some sort of research among customers and find out what the pain points are. But just as importantly, I would do some research among employees and find out, what is frustrating them. I'd ask a simple question about, what part of your job do you hate the most? What is the question that you hate the most that a customer asks you? Or what is the complaint that you hate the most? And then ask them, how would you fix that? You could make this as formal as you want or as not, but everybody wants to do a good job. And if you do the math, if you get a job in your early 20s, and if you work till you're in your 60s, you're going to work about 90,000 hours in your life. And almost everybody that I have ever met, even if they don't love it, they want that to have meant something more than just time served. They don't want to look at it. It's like, because, I might retire early. I'll get 2 years off for good behavior.
Right.
it's night. That's a long time. And everybody wants to know that what they did mattered in at least some small way. And when people are looking for this, and this is one of the things I counsel leaders about, is that you want to fix this nincompooperi. You got to do what I just said. Do what, Roger, I like the idea of an audit, a nincompooperi audit. You and I should come up with one. We should do that. We should do that for companies, a nincompooperi audit.
Right.
I love that idea. But within that, though, there has to be like, okay, you're going to find that out. Are you going to do anything about it? Because this always drives me crazy. I'll be at companies, they'll have a suggestion box, or they'll say, "Oh, we're going to ask our employees to chip in," and then they get suggestions, they don't do anything. And what I've learned in life is that there's only one thing worse than ignoring somebody. It's asking their opinion and then ignoring them.
Right. Yes.
Because that is, try that in your marriage or in your friend group or with your kids. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work in a business context. But if you're going to get into this whole situation of doing this nincompooperi audit, you have to tap into the inherent power of people who care and want to do something. And when people are looking for meaning in their life, they generally are starting with some sort of combination of family or faith or mission. But it also comes down to they want to know that they made a difference, that when they went to work every day and they worked, something got better. A customer's life got better. Their peers got better. Sometimes it could just be, well, I made a good buck and I put my kids through school. I don't know. But the whole idea is we as leaders, if we want to be effective, have to tap into that and say, we're all frustrated by the nincompooperi we've got here. Let's work together and fix this so we can create some new customer value and some new value for ourselves. So that's what I would say on that.
Okay. What can an individual worker do to avoid falling victim to nincompooperi? If an individual worker sees a system or a process that's getting in the way, what can they do?
I think the most important thing, and the problem is this can require some bravery. You need to raise your hand and say, this is creating a problem for us who work here. It's creating a problem for customers, and it's ultimately creating a problem on the bottom line. So you need to have some bravery and raise your hand and say, I think we need to take a look at this. But I would also just then counsel whoever's going to do that to do something that many of us learn earlier in our career, if we're lucky enough to have a mentor to tell us this, is that do not ever go to your boss with a problem unless you also have a suggested solution.
Right.
Because what all of us can see problems. Sometimes I don't even have any problems. I want to know, tell me the three things we might do to fix this.
Right.
So if I'm an individual employee, that's what I do. Now, the problem is, I want to be very sensitive to the fact that there are lots of cultures out there that don't support this, and it can be an entire corporate culture. It can just be some little island or fiefdom of a specific factory or store or whatever. There's one bad manager, and that can be cancerous in terms of that location and preventing employees from participating or even wanting to, because they know they're just going to get ignored or they're going to be punished.
Right. Punished for speaking up.
Correct.
You've heard the expression that a hit bird flutters. So
yes.
When you discover nincompooperi in your organization, what's the best way to deal with people who are defensive or in denial regarding their role in the problem? They just don't see it or don't want to see it.
I think the way to do that is to just, you want to marshal your facts and figures, et cetera, to the extent that you can quantify something and say, look, we're finding out this, when we do this type of repair, we're having, 17% complaints, whereas when we do these other repairs, we need to look at this. And to the extent that you can depersonalize the problem, this isn't that you did something wrong. It's that we have this issue. How are we going to solve it together? The idea there is that, can you make this a collaborative process? I think the other thing that we as leaders always need to remember too, though, is that when we want to make a change in our organizations, because there's nincompooperi or because the market has shifted and we have to figure out how to put AI into all of our products or something like that, one of the things that we sometimes forget is that when you see resistance to change in an organization, That is not bad. That is normal. This is human. This is just human beings. Change is scary. There's a famous psychological experiment that was done where they told people that they could get a mild shock. What was it? They could get a very large shock now or a mild shock later, and they get to choose. And something like 70% chose the large shock now, just because they could not deal with the anxiety and the uncertainty of not knowing what would happen going forward. We've evolved for this. It kept us from being eaten, when we were out hunting and gathering. I mean, it's like there's a reason we have this. So human beings are normally resistant to change. That's just normal. And it is our job as leaders to work people through that. And there's been a lot of research done, psychological research on what that resistance is. And it's almost never resistance to the change or to a technological change. It is almost always resistance to changes in relationships, meaning, what is my role?
Right.
How do I think about myself? How will other people think about me? Will I be as important? Will I be less important? What will my spouse think of me? What will my community think of me? And when you see resistance like that, and I didn't invent this. This was a famous Harvard Business Review paper and a lot of other research. You have to just accept that and coach people through it, and you can't always guarantee that they're going to have the same relationships or the same responsibilities, but you can talk about how the new ones are going to be important going forward.
Well, sure. And as you suggest, some leaders are turned off by resistance. They should use it as a fulcrum, if you will, to go to better ideas.
Oh, I love that. Continue, please.
If you look at any innovation, they didn't have 10 smart people around the table who agreed on everything. They had disagreement, and they would listen to each other and learn from each other. So this resistance to change is one of the toughest things for some leaders to overcome. And I can certainly see how identifying nincompooperi and listening to people closest to the processes is so critical, so very critical.
It's absolutely critical, and letting them know that they're being listened to.
Oh, yes.
I think it's not just the listening. It is thanking them and saying, okay, we want to make these changes. What do you think of these changes?
Yes. I, years ago, worked at Campbell Soup Company, and we had a CEO, and I would travel with him sometimes. We'd go out to the various plants, and he would be talking to some people about things, and somebody would say, well, I disagree with you on that. And rather than be turned off by that, he would say, terrific, you see it differently. Help me understand how you came to that conclusion. And he learned so much. And we weren't using the word nincompooperi then, but you can be sure it existed.
I believe this is not a new problem.
No, and because of his orientation and his willingness to listen to people, he was really superb as a CEO, and people thrived under him, and the company thrived.
Hey there, Leadership listeners. We have something special for you. As a thank you for tuning in, we're offering you a free copy of Roger Dean Duncan's award-winning best-selling book, Change-Friendly Leadership. In this book, you'll discover a proven framework for leading change that people will actually buy into, without all the stress and resistance that often stand in the way. You'll also learn powerful strategies to improve relationships both at work and at home, creating a healthier, more productive environment for everyone. To claim your free copy, just head over to changefriendly.com. Don't miss out on this opportunity to transform your good intentions into great performance. Again, grab your free copy of this best-selling book at changefriendly.com.
Let me ask this. Leaders of top-performing organizations, you say, organize their cultures around what you describe as 3 deceptively simple strategies: innovation, talent, and process. Now, because those strategies are available to most every organization, why don't more of them thrive?
That is a great question. And there's probably as many answers as there are non-thriving, nincompooperi addled companies out there.
Yeah.
It partly it goes for each, it's a little different in each one of those realms. Partly with innovation, we have this sort of mythology around innovation in business. I mean, I joke that, if you ask CEOs about it, man, they love innovation. It's like, it's just, they love it. But I've worked at a lot of places where everybody loved the idea. I had an idea for innovation and I didn't get a budget. And if I did it after 5 o'clock, that was okay. So that wasn't really the full support that I was looking for in that. There's this mythology that is just magical thing that just happens, or we tend to believe sometimes that it's always related to a new technology or some great new discovery. And the reality is that when you dig into the numbers, game-changing innovation is shockingly rare. For every iPhone, for every spin brush, little $5 toothbrush, there's tons of products that fail or just bump along, etc. And what we have to stop thinking about is that we have to stop waiting for that magical spark and all of a sudden we're inventing something new. Most of us don't have the time or the money to invent those or, frankly, to market them effectively out there. What we really need to be doing is asking our customers a few simple questions. And one of the things I always encourage companies to do is to go to their customers and say, hey, what really new aspect of value did you get in some industry that's completely different from ours that you wish you could get from every industry? What did somebody do that just really surprised you? And sometimes it could be little things, or it could be a way that they're partnering with their customers. And because really and truly, benchmarking, we don't call it benchmarking. We used to call it stealing ideas. Now we call it benchmarking.
Right.
It is really pretty rare that when somebody comes up with an idea, it's the first time it was ever thought of on this planet or in the universe.
Right.
Most of the time where we see a great innovation, it's where somebody says, hey, we saw this other people doing this. Let's try this with our customers. Let's try that. And asking your customers what actually matters to them. Because one of the things that some businesses don't get now is that what customer value has morphed pretty significantly over the last 20 years. Used to be it was a product, or a service, and we used to always talk about quality. Quality. And it used to be we used to say, yeah, this is a great product because it's high quality. Well, quality came, quality won, quality went home. Now people want to know, what are you wrapping around that product or service? What are you doing with that to give me a complete solution that makes my life better or my business better? And it can be as simple as there's less paperwork or something like that. And so asking customers that sort of thing and getting it sounds pedestrian, mundane, but that's where we really on an ongoing basis create new value. So when you ask how do people get stuck with innovation, is that they keep shooting for this, they want to have the rocket that goes off and everybody salutes instead of doing the blocking and tackling and how do we make our customers' lives better every day.
You're talking about fundamentals, John.
Correct. When it comes to talent, I mean, talent's really hard. It's hard to hire well. And it's even harder to train well, and it's even harder to manage well. And Roger, I want to go back to what you said about the humility of the CEO at Campbell there. Somebody like that would be a good hire because you're listening and you're looking, because you have to figure out what is it we're actually looking for in an employee. And too many times we've got, with this qualification, you're really looking for somebody who cares about customers. You're really looking about somebody who cares about a teammate. Because you can train for most of the rest of it. So you want to find those right people, and that's really hard. And then you want to train them and do lots of training with them, and then you've got to get out of the way. Because if you've done the first two jobs well, those people should be better at their job than you are, and you should just leave them alone, except for intermittently working with them. And all of that is really hard to do. And I'm not sure we're doing a great job of training up-and-coming managers on how to do that. And when you talk about process, part of the reason is, process is hard. Process is one of those ones where if you want to go to clear the room at a party, you just say, what do you want? Well, let me tell you about the way that we've process innovated. We've developed a lean methodology. It's like, I find that really great, but sometimes at parties it doesn't work as well. So,
Right.
but process is really hard. Process really does mean having to figure out working with people, but also doing value maps and figuring out exactly where you're creating value, where you're killing value, and asking yourself, is this something that we should even continue doing? Even if your customer, you might, because we've got a rubric that we've developed at MPI, and it's in the book where we talk about there's like, I think five or seven different aspects of creating value for customers in a company. Most companies, if you say, what are you good at? They're good at 3 of them, 4 of them. They're okay at a couple, and they're really, really terrible at 1 or 2. And so what we want you to do is we want you to get even better at the ones you're good at, you're great at. We want you to kind of shore up the ones you aren't. And then you kind of have to take a hard look at, like, should we continue doing this, or should we find somebody who's actually good at this to do it for us with the customers? So when you ask, how do all these companies arrive here? It's again, it's a million different stories, but it's these innovation, talent, process, they're not easy. They're available for everyone, but it really requires commitment and effort to make it work.
I'm especially interested in one part of that. Finding and retaining the best talent is clearly critically important in any organization. What's your advice on identifying and hiring top talent? You're not going to really know that much about them before they come on the job. So what can you do before you hire them so that you can hire them with confidence?
It's a great question, and I think all of us have wrestled with this, and I've had some great hires, and I've had some probably not some great hires too. So I don't, I wish I had some magic wand or dust I could sprinkle on this. I think it comes down to, again, you're going to have certain quality. I mean, if you need an engineer, they got to have an engineering degree. There's some stuff you have and a certain amount of experience.
Sure.
But I really encourage people to look beyond that, though, and to ask people questions about, tell me about a hard problem at work you solved. Tell me about a hard problem in your life or that you helped somebody with, and try to get a sense of who that person is and a sense of what motivates them. And, to the extent that you can have them, meet some other people on the team and see what kind of fit there might be there too, I think that's a great idea. But I think the real thing there is that you're not just looking for a resume. You're not just looking for a degree. You're not looking for 7.5 years of experience in this level position. I'm not a believer in that. I mean, sometimes it's important. You really want somebody that you can tell is going to come in and try to do something great. Southwest Airlines, like their whole hiring process is finding people who are going to do that,
Right.
regardless. They're again, you have certain qualifications you have to have, but they are less caught up on some of that than they are with others, than with just finding, is this person going to fit into our culture and help with our customers?
And their track record has been pretty good.
Not bad.
Yeah. So if you were starting a new organization, what are the first things you would do to ensure that the culture would not devolve into nincompooperi? How would you keep an eye on that?
That is a great question. I would start with who I started the company with. And I will tell you that MPI, I was incredibly fortunate, but I chose, there were 2 of us who started it almost 22 years ago. And I made a lot of mistakes the first year. The one mistake I didn't make was I picked the exact right partner, because I picked somebody trustworthy, somebody that if you were in a foxhole, you would want, shooting the other direction.
Right.
I picked somebody who complemented my skill sets. We don't do the same things. And we often joke that if it hadn't been to have both of us there, we might have gone off the rails.
Right.
Because we had a good balance. And then we were really committed as we went forward, as we brought people on, to make sure they fit in the culture. And to make sure that we kept doing some of the stuff I've written about in the book, is that going out and talking to customers. What is it this is what we think, but what do you think? What do you wish? What are you not getting that you wish you were getting? et cetera, and doing that kind of thing. And we are actually we're nerds about process. My business partner has written, I think he's either project managed, edited, or written, I don't know, 11 or 12 books on process. So we're really, we live what I preach.
Yes.
In terms of innovation, in terms of talent, in terms of process. And it has worked for us. And when I see it in other companies, it works everywhere. It just requires the effort.
Yes. Well, when it comes to culture, it's important to be clear about what you stand for and what you won't stand for.
Roger, thank you. Yes, I should have said that what you stand for and what you won't, and that you will not cross this line.
Sure. And, of course, history is littered with examples of organizations that didn't ask that question.
Correct.
Enron comes to mind. They were pretty big about what they stood for. They were not clear at all about what they would not stand for.
Correct.
And as they say, the rest is history.
Absolutely.
Well, finally, John, what question do you wish I had asked but I didn't, and how would you respond?
That is a terrific question. I think you've covered most everything. I think the question I might have asked is that if you're a leader, what would be the most important qualities in a leader if you wanted to be successful in the long term? And what would your focus be as a leader? And it's going to reiterate some of what we've already covered, but the idea of listening. I love the story that you told about the CEO of Campbell's. The idea of being a good listener, an active listener, the idea of being a leader or a colleague who doesn't assume they're right all the time and is willing to learn, being a leader who was willing to say, that was a mistake. It was my call. I made the call. It's my job once we have this. And that was a complete screw up. The ability to be big enough to do that, it's protective of you and the company because it means that you won't pick a direction and then drive right off the cliff with it because you're open to that. But it also sets a culture that everybody knows that what they say matters, even if there is one person who has a decision there. And I think the thing to focus on there too is to remember that when we're at work, we're not separate people from when we're not at work. This is not my quote. I read this years ago. I've thought of it and it said, whenever a man or woman says they're just being a realist, you can be pretty sure they're talking about something they're not proud of.
Right.
And when I hear somebody go, well, it's just business, I'm like, well, great line in The Godfather, but if somebody tells you it's just business, that usually is something they're not proud of.
Right.
We have one life. It encompasses you and I talking here, us being at work, us being with families, etc. You're not a different person in different spheres. And so my encouragement for everybody, but especially for leaders, is to remember that you've got to keep that consistent whole.
Thank you, John. You've managed to put us all on high alert for behaviors and practices that can help us mindfully avoid the Nincompoopery trap. We really appreciate your insights. To learn more about John and his work, go to johnrbrandt.com. That's John R. Brandt, BRANDT.com. And to grab a free copy of my book, Change Friendly Leadership, go to changefriendly.com. That's changefriendly.com. In other episodes of Leadership, I share my exclusive conversations with many more top thought leaders who offer smart tips to boost your effectiveness in both your professional and personal life. Our guests include superstars like Stephen M.R. Covey, Liz Wiseman, Dory Clark, Marshall Goldsmith, Heather Younger, Bill George, Jessica Chin, Guy Kawasaki, and many others who have insightful things to say that you can put to good use immediately. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you can stay informed on what's coming your way. Trust me, you don't want to miss any of our episodes. And please leave a comment, even if it's short. That helps promote the show to millions of new listeners. And if there's a smart thought leader you'd like me to interview, just let me know. Thanks again for joining us. Until next time, stay safe, be happy, and spread good cheer wherever you go. For Leadership, I'm Roger Dean Duncan.